Hello, everybody. Mike Lagerquist again here from Vine Faith in Action. I feel like I've been doing a lot of these recordings. We've had a real good month here in October at Vine Faith in Action. We're working on November. That'll be coming out real soon, the next month's newsletter. So be watching for that. Today, we've got a great opportunity. We've got Gregg Andersen. The Andersen family is well known within the Mankato community for Mount Kato, formerly known as Ski Haven. We've got Jim Sporting Goods, and of course, Johnny is a flying penguin, and Greg is a photographer, and all kinds of Andersons. You can recognize them because it's S-E-N, and of course, there aren't that many of those around. They're very special. So I'm going to take this opportunity just to hand it off to Greg. He has some photos that we're going to look at, but otherwise, it's kind of an informal situation. So if you do have questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to just to kind of pop in, give them a chance to finish a sentence perhaps, and let us know what your questions might be. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Gregg Andersen.
Hi there, Gregg Andersen here. I'm going to just give some of my recollection of the ski hill as it was back in the 50s and 60s. As I remember it, I'm not old enough to go back to the 1938 season that it all started. In front of me here is, I have a photo. I don't know, Mike, if we can go to your photo that I sent you of this or
Sure.
not. And it's a night shot of the ski hill. And one of the big things on that hill, if you look in the center, back as we were kids, was the toboggan run. And if you look, I don't know if Mike can point it out or not, but it'll be right in the kind of the center of the photo. Is a staging area which was made of wood with a platform where you would walk up onto an elevated platform and set your toboggan in, and it had a stop in the front that would hold the toboggan in place. It was basically a board that would flip up, which we don't have a photo of, but the night shot is where that shows up very well.
Right here?
Right in the center of the photo, right. And that, the board would, after everybody loaded the toboggan, there was one toboggan we could get about 6 or 8 people on. It was a very long one. The rest of them were good for about 3 or 4 people, 10, 12 footers. Most all were made by the Northland Toboggan Company out of St. Paul, Minnesota. And there was probably, I have 2 of them today that were the little kids' toboggans that my granddaughter right now is out in the woods using, being that we do have the early snow. And so these were available for use if you wanted to just go tobogganing. One thing that doesn't show on this this photo is at the bottom of the hill was a bridge that my grandfather had built, and he had taken some trees and bent them, got them nice and waterlogged, and bent them in an arch and built a bridge that went over the toboggan chute. The toboggan chute you're seeing here is just snow, but he later on had put 2x12 planking down the hill, and that he would then fill with snow when there wasn't a lot of snow. My grandpa and his co-worker, Augie Schoenemann, would be out there shoveling snow into this chute that was 2x12 planking going all the way down the length of the hill. Of course, once you got past the bridge, you were out into this area at the bottom that looks a little rough, and it was. That was either a bean field or cornfield. And prior to the season, I would get to ride with my grandfather he had an old truck, and we pulled a drag behind it to bust up the dirt clods a little bit so that the ride wasn't so bumpy when you would go past the bridge. on a good night, you would be out in almost to the end of the parking lot. If any of you had been out there, the parking lot was strictly from the driveway into the inn, there was probably another 200-300 feet going towards town along the railroad tracks. So if you could go back, Mike, and there's a summer shot that's a panoramic, and if we flip between the two of these, when you went through this entrance across the tracks down into the parking lot, that toboggan, the toboggans would go past this little red shack and out the length of the parking lot, which would have been to the left. It does not show on the photo. That little red shack that's there, when I was first out there as a little kid in the 50s, that was the warming hut. And we had it was an oil stove inside, and you'd sit, there wasn't any social distancing back then, but you'd sit shoulder to shoulder. And when it got a little crowded, I'd sit on my grandpa's lap and get warmed up. And then you get warmed up, and then you could take one. There was only 2 tow ropes. One was, if you would go back to the other photo again, and you'll see the first tow rope was where you see the first continuation of lights. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lights. And that was what we called the head wall. Some called it Harvey's head wall, but that went up to the top of that hill. Then you could traverse across that. And if we go to the summer shot again, you'll see on the far, far left is the beginning of what they called the Valley Run. Or the other option was to walk over to the Valley Run and get on another rope tow that was over there. These were all gasoline at the time. And I remember at one time my grandpa had gotten it was a Wisconsin engine with a tow rope pulley system that the rope would continuously go through a series of pulleys to pull you up the hill on the Valley Run. The big tow that was on the forefront here, the closest to the warming hut, that had a big bull wheel on it. And if I remember right, the bull wheel had to be at least 5 feet across, and the rope ran across that. I'm going to go down the hill across tire rims mounted to telephone poles, and the rope would drag on the ground. At the bottom, he had built some tensioners that were on sleds. So the sleds were movable, and as the rope would stretch, as it would get wet, you could pry the tensioners out and then stake them down so that the rope would stay tight. I don't know any other word to call it than a tensioner. But so these are little things that he kind of figured out as he went. One of the things that in the spring, or as the snow would get a little slushier in March, he would go out, and the rope was a sisal rope, and he would wax it. So you'd start the tow up, stand at the bottom of the hill, and he had a big bar of beeswax, and he'd let the tow rope run, and that was to keep the rope from getting saturated and stretching too much. Thus, everybody that went up the rope tow had a jacket full of wax and grease or whatever else it was picking up on the ground. Quite primitive to riding a chairlift of today.
And it wreaked havoc with your gloves too.
CNS Supply, at the time, Dan Corcoran and Wick Sherwood were selling choppers, and choppers was the glove to have. And they were I think the first people to have that chopper on. Then later on, someone made after you'd wear a hole in your choppers, they made a kind of a patch type thing with elastic on it that you could put on your mittens, and that would kind of cover it up, but you could still wear them to school without the patch on. And when you went skiing, you just have your extra patch of buckskin on there. So that was the days. We would Maholds were selling skis at that time, and they had Northland skis, and that was pretty much where we went. This is before my uncle had started a store downtown Mankato. He was down in the area of Blue Bricks is not where he was. He was at 420. I think it was 424, if I'm mistaken. It was between Crandall Jewelry's, Angusser's Jewelry, Art Craft Photoshop, right in that side of the street, across from Herberger's. If you're an old timer of Mankato, that's basically where it was. The building had formerly been a hardware store, Zimmerman Banger Hardware. And I think the history on that, Mike, you're probably up on it more than anybody, is that they had a fire at one time, and the building was empty. Upstairs was Heine, I think it was Heine Zimmerman. He had a lock and key shop up there. He was making keys, and he also lived in the building upstairs. So, and that was the start of where the Jim's Sporting Goods / Ski Shack happened, and that was the early part of the '60s that went on. So prior to that, this was our ski hill, and I think it's kind of controversial as to people think the old. In fact, John Sandberg is on right now, and I think he's living in the chalet or the log cabin that was there. That didn't come about until 1958, 59. I somewhere have photos of the construction of that. And when I had my fire downtown Mankato, I have had problems locating those images. But the story on that log cabin, as my grandpa was wanting to do it. It was kind of a dream project. He traveled up in northern Minnesota and found some people that would build a cabin with no nails. So those logs that are in that cabin that John is living in are all fitted. And if you also look at that cabin, there wasn't any chinking. And that was something my grandpa wanted to do. And these guys fit the bill, did a nice job of it. And as it would go, the train ran, if you're looking at this photo in front of us here, ran within several feet of that cabin. And so I don't know if the cabin may have been pretty close to the railroad right away or right on it, but you would be inside, and when that train would come by, the windows would rattle, the floor would vibrate. It was, but it seemed to hold together. I don't think it's fallen apart in any way, but it was almost like an earthquake coming by as you'd sit inside. The in that area there is where my grandmother first started. It had a small kitchen and a service counter out front. My grandmother would get up at 3:30 in the morning, and always she felt that having fresh donuts and fresh cookies were important, and also her barbecue beefs. She had a barbecue sandwich that was very good with burger, sloppy Joe if you want to call it. And these she would make fresh every day. And I think cookies were a nickel, and cocoa probably about the same. So you could go out with 25 cents and have a lunch. There was a pop machine in there that had bottled pop, and so you could get a soda. Otherwise, she had a homemade cocoa mix that she made every day that was on the burners. And a lot of times she would bake right in the kitchen on site if she was running low on something. But typically she was making up her barbecued hamburgers. I did find in my grandpa's archives his books that showed what they had made as the ski hill turned into a business back in the 50s and early 60s. And she, between the expenses and operating costs, they did make, this was early 60s, $37 was their profit. So the the ski and toboggan business wasn't about money as much as it was about, he was an electrician and it was something to do in the winter and provide activity for the kids of the town. At one time he did have we had a skating rink at the bottom of the hill also, which was kind of fun. And then of course, as improvements came, a toe was added where the toboggan chute was, is now that it was graded out. Toboggans went away and then it turned into all ski in maybe about the middle to late 60s. Later on, it was sold to the Augustine family. And my recollection there was we had Ski Haven Golf, which I worked at the driving range. And one day a guy came driving up and he was looking for my grandpa. And I had a chat with him and his name was Paul Augustine. And the Augustine family purchased it right after that summer. We had closed the golf range. It was a driving range. And the Augustine family purchased the property and did what they did today, which is a fantastic ski area, which we're very lucky to have. Once though that completion was done, I have two small boys one was born in 81, one was born in 83, Ryan and Eric, started skiing out there. And we were able to ride the chairlift. They stopped the chairlift. My grandfather, the great grandkids, we got on the lift, rode to the top of the hill, and he was overjoyed to see them ski on that hill. And what a great job that Augustines had done developing it in the manner in which they did. So very happy ending. And so it is what we have today, which is a great facility. I don't know if there's anybody else that's on today, maybe that had skied or ice skated or ran a toboggan. You could even bring your own sled out there if you wanted to. When there was no snowmaking, so a lot of times my grandpa would haul snow in his truck to put into the toboggan chute. And one winter we packed the ski jumps, and the one jump I think my dad had jumped 125 feet, which you will see the ski jumps are hard to see on the summer shot, but they may show up better on the winter shot. They're just to the right hand side of the big toe that went up the steep hill there. Those would be the ski jumps. So between the toboggan run, right in there were two jumps. There was two. One was a big jump that went all the way to the top. The other was there was two other jumps that were over in what we call the valley or the beginner runs that are there today. And there was one small jump to the far right, right on a little path to the far right of the photo underneath one of those lights. Right in that area, there was another small jump. So jumping was a big deal at that time when the hill started, and there was probably as much jumping going on as there was skiing. I do have a photo in here too of one of the premier jumpers of Mankato, who's still living, Rich O'Brien. Many of you might know Rich. There he is flying off the jump at Mount Kato. What year, I don't know. You'd have to ask Rich, probably the 50s, I'm guessing. I think, boy, I don't want to guess Rich's age, but I think he's over 70. So we'll leave it at that. Otherwise, good times were had in the early days. I was unfortunately broke my leg twice out there at the hill. Once when I was 7 and once when I was 13. So it got to be a routine deal for crutches for me. Sat out several seasons, but we're still skiing today and happy to have the facility in the manner in which it's being run now. I'm not sure, but John, if he gets on here, somebody said they heard from Skyline heard snowmaking going on last night, and here we are, the end of October. The only time I can remember ever skiing in October was when we had the Halloween snowstorm. So I don't know, maybe he can jump on here and see if that rumor is true.
John, you'll have to unmute yourself.
John Sandberg.
Hey, sorry. Speaking of crutches, I'm using a pair of crutches right now. So, there is no truth to the rumor that we made snow. No, we did not make snow. Although we were supposed to have a bike race this weekend, so that was going to be in the way, and that's now canceled. But as of yet, we will probably start taking our snow guns out next week.
Wow.
And that's got to still be pretty early.
Yeah, we're right about on schedule. It really, I don't want to, take up any of this time, but yeah, we're chomping at the bit and ready to go. And I mean, it's something that I think that people are looking forward to. So we're looking forward to having people.
Is John in the chalet right now? Is he?
I'm in the cabin right now.
Oh yeah. It'd be kind of fun. I don't know if you can turn your camera on or not, John, but that fireplace in there was pretty unique fireplace in its day, with the ventilation and everything with it. It was Phil Forey was a local guy here. Pete is still in business here with Forey Septic Systems, the son, and Phil had built that fireplace, and really it's really a well done piece. I think it's still holding together. I don't know. I haven't been there in a while.
Yeah, you know what it is, and if you guys just want to keep going and give me a few minutes, I'll turn my camera on and face it, towards the fireplace, and people can look at that. I know they certainly don't want to look at me, but I can give me a couple minutes, and I'll just turn that on.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. God, that'd be very nice of you, John. So back into the pictures, I think I did include one photo, Mike, of the season pass, which that was one of the original ones that my grandpa had given me. And as things went back then, everybody knew everybody. I see Penny Banward is on here. I remember her skiing. And so he'd give you that, but everybody knew everybody, so it wasn't a big deal. Just went out and skied. But later on, he did have a ticket, a paper ticket on a piece of elastic that you could attach to your parka, but nobody ever looked at them. So, but I think they were just kind of a nice to have a collection of tickets to see how many times you skied. And I remember a lot of times it would snow, and there was no telephone at the ski hill. And so people would call our house and maybe unable to get a hold of my grandparents, lived up on Pearl Street, and want to know if they were the hill was going to be open the next day. So it was kind of a week by week, day by day, whether we were going to be skiing on Saturday or not. Then you might get a little bit of snow on Sunday, and the hill would be open. But if it was cold, it might be a problem getting the gasoline and tow engines going. So even though with all intentions of opening up at 9 a.m., it might be 10 or 11, they were not the most reliable. But later on, my grandpa did get electricity to the top of the hill, and they put in some electric rope tow motors, which were much more reliable. So rope tows were where it was at. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything, but I think that's about my recollections of the 50s and 60s, and things were pretty primitive back then. I don't know of anybody that went there and didn't have a good time. And I have always had many compliments of how people felt very much at home. My grandparents were very homey, lovable, common people. So good memories.
Greg, this is Penny.
Hi,
I just
Penny.
have to share that you are very right. 50 years ago, I helped chaperone a ski club from Welcome Memorial. So I would go out early on a Saturday morning before the bus would get there. And the only people in that log cabin were your grandparents. And I remember your grandfather was always building the fire, and your grandma was always busy cooking those sloppy joes. And it was just great memories. They were such nice people.
Yeah. Yeah, and he liked to entertain also. I guess I had didn't mention that, but he was could not read music. However, he played an ocarina or a sweet potato, different harmonicas, mandolin, banjo. So he had a lot of fun sitting around the fire, entertaining people. He also was a very accomplished yodeler, which you won't hear too many people yodel these days, but he would yodel quite regularly. Outside was a better place for it, then it didn't rattle the windows. But so yeah, we kind of had our own little show out there. It was fun. And in the summertime, we'd go out as a family, and we would shoot clay pigeons and bows and arrows and fly kites, and so it was a great place to go growing up as a kid. So
Oh, there's the fireplace.
oh, we got it. Okay, way to go, John.
I'm going to stop sharing so that we can get that.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe John, if John says something, it'll come up to, if you're in speaker view, it should pull that right up to the big picture. That looks like local stone. Is that like Kasota or limestone?
I
Greg?
believe so. I'm not sure which quarry it came from, but it is. It came right from here, and when you look at it, they had the vents, and as you turn on those vents, it was really fun because it really heated the place up very nicely. But he had benches in there that you would sit on, and usually you were close enough to someone else that you could stay warm. But yeah, I don't think anything's been done. The glass front, I think, is probably the only thing that's changed. And I don't know, I guess I would ask John, but with the uniqueness of the cabin construction, I don't know that it's ever had to be caulked or chinked. If it's still fitting tightly, that would be, a good 70 years later. No, not quite 70 years, 60 some years later. If it's still tight, I don't know.
Yeah, we have done a little caulking, especially around ends, and then, staining, but no, the windows are far draftier than the logs are for sure.
Yeah, and those logs, and I'm not exactly sure how that it happened, but they were Northern States Power Company supplied those logs, but they had to be skunned. So there was quite a project where they were all skunned by hand with draw knives. I've got some photos somewhere. I've been unable to locate them of the setting up the logs and hand skinning every one of them before they were notched and put into place. So a lot of hand work into that cabin there. So I don't really have much more to add here. Hopefully I've given a good account of the 50s and 60s that I can remember. My dad, possibly, he is now 93 years old.
Oh, we just lost your video. There you are.
My father, possibly, we may have to get in touch with him, and he could give you he was born in 1927, so he could give you the 30s, 40s info on that. He's still is quite active.
Hey, Greg, do you know what the property was before the ski hill was put out there? Was it just rural?
I think it was pretty much pasture. I remember at one time they had cows on there grazing the side of the hill, and that the far valley run, they would cut hay on it. That was, and even as we were skiing, they would cut that and make, I'm gonna guess, horse hay. I don't know if the trews were involved in that part of it or not, or the willocks. Then of course the Thompson family, they were all pretty active, but there was cows, and the cows would traverse the hill, and so there was like cow paths going back and forth across the steep headwall hill. And I would go out in the summer with my grandpa, and we would cut buttonweed with scythes. Then later on, they had gotten a mower, and we would mow the hills, and just maybe do them once. And then after that, when I was, I believe, in about high school, we started the golf range, the driving range, and then things were getting mowed regular, and we even had a ball picker that we towed behind the mower at that time. So I think it was pretty much farm use. My grandfather had gotten the good look at it because he worked on, as a young man, he worked on the Rapidan Dam project. And so that was on the way to work. And they did walk from West Mankato, or I'm sorry, they lived on Pearl Street at that time, top of Main Street Hill, and they would walk to Rapidan to work on the dam and then back home daily. So that was quite a hike just to get to work.
Yeah. What was your dad's name?
My father's name is Ronald. My grandfather's name is Harvey.
And your dad had brothers or a brother?
Had a brother, Jim,
Okay,
who passed away a year ago. He had a ski shop and sporting goods store in downtown Mankato. my dad was a photographer.
Jim was a big fan of the Marigold Dixielanders.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. He
Yeah, we lived,
originated the
and
pontoon rides on the river.
there you go. And we lived behind the Claridges in North Mankato, who were the Marigold people. So Jim Hayes, Gary Claridge, that whole crew were longtime family friends and neighbors.
My mother tells about when they were young, they went out to Harvey's ski hills or hills, and they had toboggan parties, and maybe they had ski parties, I'm not sure. But that would have been in about the 1930s, maybe late 1920s.
Yeah.
And they sure appreciated that. They had a lot of fun going out there in the wintertime.
You know, it was prior to, you know, when they say it was founded in like 1938 or whatever, there was a lot of that activity that went on there was 11 in my grandpa's family. And so they were always looking for something to do in the winter, and that was one of them. And I'm not sure who the owner was prior, but I know that they had a ski jump over in West Mankato by Tinkham, which would be Byron Street up in that area, and that they were able to go out to this hill and build a jump. I think it's kind of how it all started out. It's told to me. So ski jumping was really big. Downhill skiing was not as big, and tobogganing, of course, find a hill and everybody was having fun. So.
And I wanted to mention, I have stumbled across in the Minnesota State University archives an interview that was done with Harvey, and it was a Dolly.
Right.
And that's very nice. What I'll try to do, I've been trying to find it, but I haven't real quickly. But if you'd like, I can send everybody the direct link to that, because it's really a very fun interview to listen to, because they are sitting in the Pearl Street house. And
Right.
at one point, I believe Harvey talks about growing up there and how the hillside was bare, and they would go over, is it a pond of some sort, I think? And they could look right across at the pond almost a mile away directly from their house, because there was nothing up there to block their view.
Yeah, apparently he talked about the slough over by St. Joseph's Hospital.
Yeah.
And they would hunt over there. And of course, living at the top of Main Street, they had a bobsled. And when conditions were right, they'd run the bobsled down Main Street Hill. And he had said one time that they had a good amount of ice, and they made it into North Mankato without hitting a train. And then the other thing that he also liked ice skating and owned Mud Lake at one time.
Oh.
And Mud Lake is where the Mankato Figure Skating Club actually had the ice follies come down, and I think it was Shipstead and Johnson, and the Johnson, one of the founders of the ice follies, was a friend of my grandfather's, and so they put on a little show over there for a winter carnival when he had owned that pond over in that area. So lots of things to do in the winter in our family.
Greg, Rich Krause here. I just retired from the Mount Kato Ski Patrol after 30 years, and I'm curious, do you have any idea when the ski patrol started at Mount Kato?
I do, Rich, I do. And there was a man from Iowa. I was on the first ski patrol. A man from Iowa came, and if you're running his name by me, he had started that out. And I remember it was a big thing, whether or not, because we had our own ski patrol. This would have been in the 60s. And it was basically a group of guys we were all skiers, and I believe it was Mrs. Mullenberg was a nurse, and she gave us some first aid training along with Dr. Highmark of Mankato. Gave us some first aid training that we could make use of on the hill. Later on, this guy came from, oh boy, just over the border in Iowa someplace. I think maybe he was from Holiday Mountain, which was in Esterville. That was a little ski resort. If you have some archives from the National Ski Patrol and you look back to the 60s, his name is probably prominent. He was instrumental, I think, in starting a couple ski patrols.
Okay. So it was in the 60s that you think the ski
Yeah,
patrol?
it was 60s or maybe early. I graduated from high school in 1970, and I believe we National Ski Patrol had started in 1970. Very possible.
Okay,
It was not mid 60s, that's for sure.
okay.
Yes, and it was after my uncle had become very involved in the hill. And so that would have been after 1965,
Okay,
sometime in there.
thank you.
But I'll see if I can remember his name. God, I can see him today. Really a nice man.
Okay.
I will admit the only time I was at Ski Haven was 7th grade. North Mankato Junior High had their annual trip out to the ski hill. And I went there with my twin brother, Dave. And my day was cut short because Dave broke his ankle going up the tow rope. So
Oh, no.
the other hazard, of course, was that you created those frozen ruts, and he must have gotten his knee or his leg twisted trying to lift out or going up the hill. So it also ruined my tennis game because we were tennis partners, and I would always hit it back so he could return the ball to me. So I still do that, and I get slaughtered on the tennis court because that's not the best way to get points.
Oh my. Yeah, that's when Rich was asking about the ski patrol, I was in 2nd grade, so it would have been 1959 when I broke it. And my grandpa came over, and we did not have bindings that released. They were a bear trap binding back then. So I caught a tip and spiral fractured my leg. Anyway, they had to take the ski off and unwind my leg. And he put me on a toboggan and he pulled me back over. They, had no idea if it was broken or not. We kind of thought it was, and just waited for my dad till 5 o'clock to come and get me on a Sunday because there's no way to call him. And that was a little painful. Then we went down to the Mankato Clinic, which was at the bottom of the Main Street Hill. And I remember it was really cold because they'd shut the heat off. Different memories. Did an x-ray, put me in a cast, sent me home. So that's how they did it in the old days. When I was in 7th grade, I broke it again. And that would have been 1966 or 65. And there was no ski patrol in 1965. That again, my grandpa hauled me out of there on a toboggan. Somehow we got to the bottom of the hill and he'd pull you back to the parking lot and your dad would come and get you. I don't think we ever saw an ambulance out there at that time. So.
I'm guessing they couldn't get away with that nowadays.
I think, yeah, you hear the sirens go out there and somebody typically got hurt in this day and age. It's lots. John could tell you how many trips an ambulance comes, but I don't think for the amount of people skiing today with the safe equipment that we did not have, I think accidents are minimum. And the other thing that with the grooming that's done out there in that hill today too, it's just smooth and nice. They do a great job.
Anybody else have any memories they'd like to share about Ski Haven or questions?
Well, I remember, am I?
Yep, you're on, Mary.
Yep, unmuted. Okay. My ex-husband's uncle worked in the winter, he would work out there. I don't know if you remember him, Greg. His name was Buck Petra.
Oh, Buck, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And one time we went out to visit him because we were in the service. So we got back and we went to visit him, and he decided we should ski. Now I hadn't skied before. What we didn't have was, we didn't have a lot of instruction before we went up there. And I remember going up on the tow rope and nobody told me how to get off from it.
Yeah.
And that I thought I just let go instead of I had to swing out to, and I wiped out half of it was a beginning ski class from MSU. Because I let go and I went a little ways up and then I just backed up, and none of us knew how to get back on our skis or anything. But that's my memory of it. And that would have been back in about 69, I think.
Yeah.
In the winter. But he had a resort up north, and then
Yes.
in the winter he would come down and do all kinds of things. So he'd help there. He was good friends with Jim.
Yeah.
And, so.
Buck could do about anything you wanted to do.
Oh yeah. And he
Just play. He
could,
was very talented guy.
and he could tell a lot of stories too. You didn't always believe everything he said.
He was a good man.
Yes. Yeah.
Anybody else have any stories to share or questions to ask of Greg? All right, well, seeing none other, I want to take this opportunity to thank Greg for coming in and sharing with us today. I think it's a nice way to ease into the winter months. We weren't expecting it this soon, but now when people go out to Mount Kato, Ski Haven, they'll have a little better appreciation of where it came from to get to where it's at today. So I'll take one more chance if anybody has anything they want to add or ask. Don't forget to unmute yourself if you do, but if not, thank you, everybody. It's been fun to reminisce with Greg, and we appreciate you coming and sharing some time with Vine Faith in Action. We will be, as I said, coming out with the next newsletter very soon, so look for that. We'll be emailing it to those who we have email addresses for and sending it out right around the 1st of November. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Penny, for your thank you, and we'll see you all real soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yep, thank you. It was fun.